This edition is a special. We're joined by the First Assistant President General, Mr. Raymond Dugue. Welcome back.
Well, thank you, Sister Louise. It's always a pleasure to be on your show and to support our community. Thank you.
Well, this is a special, as you know, this being Women's History Month and a time that we celebrate women. But as you know, in this show, we don't really select a particular day to celebrate female. But we wanted to do a spotlight, particularly as it relates to Haitian American history and the role of the Haitian woman in liberating the country many centuries ago. So, could you first give my audience just a brief overview of the revolution and then how these key sisters did what they did to further liberate and the Haitian, the people of Africans of Haitian extraction on the continent?
First of all, we're talking about Haiti. This was what we know is the indigenous name for that land, and it encompasses the 1/3 western part of the island and the 2/3 eastern part. I think the eastern part people know it as Dominican Republic, and the western part people know it as Haiti. I think in English it's pronounced Haiti, but it's pronounced Haiti. The whole island was called Haiti. It's one island, one people, and these were the Araks of Taino descent. So this is like known. The interloper, Cristobal Colon, you know him as Christopher Columbus, supposedly came in this area. He was looking for an all-water route to India for spices, control, domination, as well as gold, of course. That always comes in with the same motive. Anyway, December 1492, he arrives in the northern part of that island, what is now Mole Saint Nicolas. This is the northwest part of Haiti. In fact, I believe the US government has a big station there where they monitor the whole Caribbean. And so he gets there, and known to everyone except some of our historians is that they knew exactly what they were doing. Cristobal Colon had been in Elmina. Elmina is off the coast of Ghana. This was the very first slave dungeon concentration camp built. That was built by Diego de Azambuja. And Columbus was with him. So then, for anyone to suggest Columbus, was just an explorer, this and that, that's patently untrue. These guys knew what they were about. They came for conquest, domination, mineral resources, and everything. And independent of where was there, they want to kill and dominate and commit genocide. Anyway, having said all that, so Columbus was with Azambuja in Elmina. In fact, the original name of Elmina is Anumansa. This is the god, the African name. But because the Portuguese called it Elmina, everybody knows it as that. That's the very first slave dungeon. And all along the coast of Ghana, you see that. But getting back to it, they get here, they knew exactly what they were about to do. And so they start their settlements. They came to take out the riches and kill people. I mean, take out the riches and if need be, kill people. Well, you will have to kill people because you're taking their riches and their resources. We know this for a fact. The very first recorded slave rebellion on that island was one of the sons of Columbus. He had a plantation. We're talking 1519. So from the very beginning, this is where this was going to be. After they exterminated the indigenous population, what's his name? De las Casas comes up with this great idea, Bartolomé de las Casas. We can't really take advantage or exploit or kill off the indigenous. Why don't we go to Africa, enslave Africans, and have them do the work? And this is from a Catholic priest. So I want our listeners to be fully cognizant. We Africans do not have any friends, and nobody's coming to our rescue. Anyway, move on. We Africans have resisted since time immemorial. From the very beginning, we resisted in our lands, in the forest, in the jungles, through what they call the last bath, at the slave dungeons, at the concentration camps, on the seas, on the shores, on the boats, everywhere. And this is why, the term is created, marron. It's a Spanish term. It means runaway enslaved people, mostly Africans. The critical point of this revolution in Haiti if you can pigeonhole one African who responds, who is the person most responsible, who personifies that, his name is Francois Mackendal. He was born in, of all places, in Africa, but you've heard of Wakanda, but he was born in Makanda, in the Congo. As soon as the colonial people, the slave masters, the murderers, the genociders, of course, what they do is they rename the lands. Supposedly they're going to discover these lands and claim it for their king and queen. So this island, after they butcher and massacre all the indigenous, they rename it Saint-Domingue. In Spanish is Santo Domingo. In French, Saint-Domingue. That was the name of the island. Francois Mackendal starts his movement. He starts out 1748, 1751. It's a full-blown upheaval. It's a rebellion. What's important about that? It was race first. It wasn't just about me or my family or my close associates. It was about us, the race. So, in the UNIA, we embrace one God, one aim, one destiny, and of course, race first. Well, we know this to be true, that Francois Mackendal is the first recorded race firster in this hemisphere, because he pronounces we Africans are going to defeat these evildoers, these murderers, these genociders. And what he does is he implements race first in the concept of bringing us together, forming serious organizational patterns. I mean, there's not enough that can be said about Francois Mackendal. Okay, he's eventually killed. By the way, let me add, it's not so much that he was defeated, he was tricked. And you'll notice this is a pattern. Same thing is going to happen to Boukman. Same thing is going to happen to Louverture. It's almost like, and even Anna Kowanda, the ruler of Haiti, and how she was tricked. And after the Spanish tricked her into a meeting, they burned everything inside. But anyway, getting back, Mackendal is tricked, and after he's killed, he's not just killed. His scalp, his body is just dismembered, and his scalp is displayed prominently in the northern part of Haiti, Cap Haitien. That's where my roots are from. This is to terrorize our people. This is 1751. It looks dreary. It looks like we've gotten a major setback. But once you've touched the fervor of independence, of liberty, independence or death, you can't go back. So back and forth, back and forth. So now we get up to 1791, and that's important because August 14th, throughout history, we're told that there was some sort of organized meeting, some sort of Congress, and they call it Bois Caïman. Bois means the woods, the forest. Caïman means alligator. So it's the alligator woods in the northern part of Haiti. You'll notice a lot of the fighting, a lot of the big battles are in the northern part of Haiti, because that is where all the plantations were. The southern part was where the white folks and the mulattoes lived and try to live well off. But the big gargantuan plantations were all in the north. This is why the revolution, the skirmishes, the upheavals, they all happened, not exclusively in the north, but a lot of it, because Dessalines did fight in Jacmel, which is the southern part, Petit Goave, all of these Jérémie, these were major battles. 1791, Sister Louise, our ancestors get together. And it wasn't, there is a ceremony, there is a Vodun ceremony, and that's important because this is our spiritual belief. Just think about it. Before we were enslaved, we we had our own forms of worship. We had our own religion. In fact, Africans invented and created the concept of religion. You know, the very first collection of spiritual writings on the planet, you know, spiritual writings collection, people call that Bible. The very first one is called the Book of Coming Forth by Day. We know this because in the temples, in the burial grounds, in the pyramids, you find these texts of the fifth dynasty pharaoh of ancient Egypt. We know it as Kemet. Pharaoh Unas put the whole scriptures in his tomb, including the 42 admonitions of Ma'at. I think there's some guy named Moses who has been claimed to in Mount Sinai to receive 10 commandments. We've got a rude awakening for that man because there were 42 way before he came on the scene. 1791, August 14th. The critical point is we get together and we've plotted and planned. In 8 days, August 22, we are going to unleash reciprocity and terror to those evildoers. That's what the meeting was for. Now, a lot of people will tell you it was a big fancy celebration, big voodoo ceremony. I have to caveat that, and I'll tell you why. You know, we are enslaved. How are we going to leave in the middle of the night, you know, leave the plantation and have a 3-4 hour meeting and nobody's going to notice that? That's not possible. So it couldn't have been all that great detail. The purpose of the meeting was to select leaders, and since the ability to read and write was limited, it was rocks and pebbles. Now let's talk about Cécile Fatima. You know, that night, Boukman is going to utter his Boukman's prayer. Boukman Dutties, we are told that he was in Jamaica and he was a troublemaker. He was a rabble rouser, and the British slave holders thought, you know what, let's get rid of this guy. He is a problem. Let's, exile him and cast him away. And of all the places he could have been casted away, to send him to Saint-Domingue, which was the name of the island, I think was completely disastrous on their part, because this is the place where you should not have sent him, because everything was there. All the conditions were right. You had over 500,000 enslaved Africans. You had 20,000, 25,000 whites and over 500,000 Africans enslaved. In places like Jamaica, it was for every one white, you had close to more than 20. In Saint-Domingue, it was more like 15. So meaning, if we were going to start a revolution, it would have been harder in Haiti, because we had the majority, but we didn't have the absolute majority. Let's say, for example, that Jamaica had. So they probably thought, okay, let him go there, let him talk his rabble rousing, and he'll get what he deserves. So Boukman is a Vodun cleric. He understands Lua. This is the spirit. Everything is about praying to our God who is so good, who will guide us to victory. Our God who is so good and so just commands vengeance. So that day, Boukman ends the meeting with his prayer. And the reason why we have to inform everyone of Cécile Fatima is Boukman didn't create the prayer. He is given credit for it because he's got the voice, he's got the charisma, and he was a bad brother. The creator, the designer of the prayer is Cécile Fatima. Cécile Fatima is going to outlive many of us. She is a woman, of course, African woman, born into slavery, and is a Vodun cleric on the queen's side, on the female side. We Africans defeated Spain, number 3 superpower on the planet. England, number 2 superpower on the planet. And France, the number 1 superpower on the planet. doing from 1791 up until 1804. But who wrote the history books? Who, who is the one in charge of the domain of discourse? Who controls the information? Who controls the technology? We don't. So what do you think the losers are going to write about the winners? Well, they're not going to write anything good. So meaning it's going to be distorted and it's going to be underemphasized. They're always going to give different reasons why we Africans defeated number three, number two, number one. In fact, it's the only time in recorded history of previously enslaved people rose up, defeated their enslavement, and then create a nation. It's never been done. So this is historic. So they're writing their history books. They control everything. So they're never going to tell you the truth or how uplifting it was. But the other thing is, these same characters who write, who control the narrative, they're also anti-women. So, they're not going to give women, especially Black women, their due credit. So in this revolution, Sister Louise, at least 1/3 of the combatants were women, and everybody knew that. I mean, you had some of the greatest African women, African warriors doing so much. So let's start off with Cecile Fatima. I mean, this is the architect. She's the one who organizes this meeting to go out and engage in terror against these evildoers. She's the one who creates the prayer, who connects, the prayer in Creole and English says, God, you who creates the earth, who creates the sun that gives us light, who holds up the ocean and its mighty waters, you, God, we know you are hidden. We know you are in the clouds, but you see all that the white man has made us suffer. You see that his God calls forth crime, but our God, who is so good, commands us to vengeance. He commands us to do right. Then he says, throw away the likeness of the image of the white man's God and listen to liberty, which speaks in our hearts. This is the prayer that Cecile Fatima creates, gives the order to Boukman, and Boukman is the one who cites it and gets the credit. But Cecile Fatima is the genius, giant. That's number one. Number two, even before we get there, there is an African woman. Her name is Abdalaya Montu. Her nickname is Toya. She's going to be called Tant Toya, Auntie Toya. She's the one. She was an enslaved African woman on the same plantation with Dessalines, the plantation of the French white man Duclos. Duclos will get fed up with Dessalines and sell him to another plantation. And actually, it wasn't a plantation. It was just a Black man who was working hard and he needed help. So he bought Dessalines, and his last name was Dessalines. And that's why Dessalines takes the name, Jean-Jacques Dessalines. Tantoya was originally from Dahomey. Dahomey is a West African kingdom in present-day Benin. She is an excellent. What's the history of Dahomey? Dahomey's had what you call warrior queens throughout their history. These were the baddest. I mean, these are women, Black women, beautiful Black women. When you see that movie, Wakanda, you see the shaved head Black women warriors. That's from Dahomey. I mean, all of that. They did a good job of replicating that. But Tant Toya, the nickname is Toya. But Dessalines is going to call her Tant, Auntie, Tant Toya, and she's the one who trains Dessalines, teaches him to be a warrior and a soldier, how to have compassion. And how do we know Dessalines has compassion? Let me cite an example for you, cite some data. For about 300 years, white folks had been killing an average of 30,000 enslaved Africans in Saint-Domingue. 30,000 every year. We're talking around 1,500 all the way up to 1,800. I'm going to call that 300 years. It's less than 300 years. Can you imagine? 30,000 Africans every year, like clockwork. After Dessalines defeats these white evildoers and establishes a nation, he wants all the white folks out. I mean, the ones who couldn't escape, he said, we've got to exterminate them. How many does he kill? He doesn't even kill 2,000. And then in the history books, they call him a savage and a madman. You know, for almost 300 years, killing 30,000 Africans. Dessalines, one time, doesn't even kill. And these are 2,000 evildoer whites, evil, because they had benefited, they had lived off slavery. So, I mean, you got to be careful with the history. But so now we talked about Cecile Fatima, we went over Tantoya. She dies in 1805. Dessalines gives her a state funeral because he says, I wouldn't be who I am without Tantoya. And the respect and to be humane, the respect for authority, respect for women and organization and structure. You know, when Dessalines joins, you know, he rises up the ranks. It was like a servant, not a servant, but a gopher for 2 cents. Go for this, go for that. Eventually, he rises up to the most respected general. You know, all of this, he had a beginning, and all of this is due to Tantoya. So if you want to talk, and this is the month of March, where we show honor and respect to Black women, you know, Tantoya is up there. So when she dies, he gives her a state funeral in 1805. And he says, if not for her, Dessalines would be Dessalines. So we say respect. Another African queens is Marie Heureuse Claire Félicité Bonheur. Who is she? She's Dessalines' wife. I mean, she's going to, I mean, you know, Sister Louise, you know, behind all, not behind, but next to, in front of all great African kings, you know, there's got to be an African queen. You know, you look at Menelik in Ethiopia. If not for Queen Taitu, Menelik doesn't become Menelik. Everybody look at Queen Hatshepsut, you know, Queen Nzinga. So this is nothing new for us. So Félicité Bonheur, and there's an organization in honor of her called FF, Fondation Félicité, by our dear sister Barina Bello in Haiti. And what she does is, you know, in the Constitution that Dessalines is going to write on May 20th, 1805, there are certain parts of it, you know, it's not Dessalines, this is Félicité, but she really brings the softness. Like, for example, all children must be part of inheritance. Because, you know, sometimes you have children, you know, not with your common law wife, not with your wife. No, and she said all children must have inheritance. And by the way, that Constitution of May 20th, 1805, it calls for public school education. That's the very first in this hemisphere, because education was for the elite. Not everybody could go to school. So again, that's a Félicité, Marie-Claire Heureuse, Félicité de Bonheur. All of those things, you can, as you read the Constitution, by the way, that's the finest document we as Africans have ever produced since being departed from Africa. There's so many parts of it. For example, the first article states that the slavery is ended. All Africans coming to this land are free. And then the second part names it Haiti. And then article number 3 states all people in Haiti are Black or African. So a lot of these things. Okay, so we've gone over Tantoya, Cécile Fatima, Marie-Claire Heureuse Bonheur. Now, there were a couple of soldiers. I have to say this quickly. Marie-Jeanne Lamartinière. Oh, this is the woman. This is the woman, Sister Louise, at the most famous battle. It's called Crête à Pied, the northern part of Haiti. I mean, 10,000 white French soldiers, killers, wanting to enslave our people, versus 2,000 Africans defending the fort. And they weren't really defending the fort. They were just there to harass and destroy the French. So can you imagine? The French kept thinking, these white folks kept thinking, let's just blow this thing to smithereen and do what we can to finally finish them off. The Africans were only interested in killing white folks. Say, bring it on, come over, keep trying. And then so at one point, it looks like it's really not going well. Dessalines in the middle, and there's a very famous painting where Dessalines says, all of those, he says, all of you who want to remain slaves and die a cowardly death, you stay right here and complain. All of you who want to live free, African, independent, who want to avenge your ancestors, let's take the fight to them. Who is with me? Who's the first person that says, I'll go to hell with you, Mr. Dessalines? Marie-Jeanne Lamartinière. I mean, a sister, can you believe that? All the brothers there. She takes out her sword and says, I will follow you to hell, my leader. And then Dessalines says, even if I tell you 1,000,000 times, I will surrender. Never believe Dessalines will surrender. We will win. We will kill them eventually. So she's going to become part of his personal security. And get this, she was also with her husband. Her husband was actually the what do you call that? The military leader of the fort. His name is Louis Dugue Lamartinière. He's eventually killed later on in 1802. This battle is in the month of March, believe it or not, month of March, 1802. It lasts from March 4th until March 25th. I mean, 10,000 French whites are killed, and Dessalines builds an underground path, and then they all escape.
I want to thank you, Brother Raymond, for your work in keeping that information, keeping that story alive, and really sharing it. Can you tell people about where they can hear you during the week? I know you're on some broadcast.
As part of the UNIA, we have the UNIA Rock Media. You can go on to it, uniarockmedia.com. Rock is spelled R-O-C, as in Restaurant Owners Corp. We're also on YouTube. Our radio show, The Community Focus, is no longer terrestrial, it's on the internet. And we're on every Monday and Tuesday from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern New York time. And our website, the UNIA website, is www.unia-aclgovernment.com. So again, thank you for having me, Sister.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate that.